Brendan, my good friend, I had this really fancy kind of monologue introduction all set up for today about how this has been a magnificent month, all the highlights and things memories that we can take with us forever. Geordie Rose, the man that created the D-Wave, he's been here. A David Icke last night. And then I was going to kind of all wax lyrical about the fact that this was going to be the perfect ending to the month, because I really enjoy working with you, Brendan. And it's the topics that I enjoy getting into anyway. So I've got Brendan here with me now. We'll get to him in just a moment. But even earlier on today, folks, I was lucky enough to catch something going on the internet that I wasn't actually aware of. And it came from Northrop Grumman. Now, Northrop Grumman were testing their latest piece of kit, which is an Omega first stage rocket. Now, I'm just going to play that in the background there, because what we're listening to is the latest act in what I think could be a possible space race.
4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
So that there, you can go and watch that. That comes from Northrop Grumman. And there it is. That's one of their rockets. Them testing a new piece of kit that's going to be taking commercial and military satellite into orbit. Just recently, just the other day, we've seen Elon Musk and SpaceX finally launching 60 test satellites as part of this Starlink constellation that hopefully one day, in Elon's opinion anyway, will consist of tens of thousands of these satellites orbiting the planet, beaming back down internet. We've also watched in recent times how SpaceX have perfected the art of the reusable rocket. Yeah, there was a few mishaps at the start, but now you can pretty much put money on every time that going up, it comes back down. And that in turn has really lowered the costs of space travel, putting satellites into space, putting astronauts into space. Talking of astronauts, in recent times we've also had Donald Trump. He's talked about the Space Force. We've talked about that here on the show many, many times. And then, of course, just recently, as we've been talking about now for a couple of days with various guests, we've had the Pentagon. They've finally come out and they're talking about the fact that they're investigating things that possibly come from space. So today, like I say, this is the perfect time and the perfect way to round off a month here on the Kev Baker Show, because Brendan Drachler is here with us. And for anyone who doesn't know Brendan, he's an Astrophysics PhD student at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And he's working to understand how we can detect the most dense and energetic objects in our universe, black holes and neutron stars. Now, he's also working to understand the fundamental structure of black holes and how we can learn more about them. Brendan has spoken on topics ranging from the solar system to the nature of dark energy to supernova and many things in between. And for more information about Brendan and his outreach efforts, you can find them over at thestateoftheuniverse.com. It's the name of his podcast as well, folks. It's all one word, thestateoftheuniverse.com. I urge you all to go and check out his podcast. He speaks to some of the leading scientists in their particular fields in the world today, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So, Brendan, welcome back, sir. And what a time to be talking to you.
Thank you, Kev. I appreciate that. I think the flat earthers were trying to shut us down there at the beginning.
It was either them or the people that realized we both work for NASA, right?
Yeah, they were trying to mess with the network or something. I'm not sure what they were up to. But
it's one of the two,
it didn't work, because here we are.
It's one of the two. How you been doing, man? You been working hard?
Good. Yeah, I'm great, Kev. How are you? How are things going over here?
Well, the show's really exploding. It truly is. And like I say, though, this is really the perfect way to end the month, because for the last week or so, well, I've really been asking a number of people about this story that came out in the New York Post. And this is all about the fact that they do investigate UFOs. Now, you'll appreciate, Brendan, this is the kind of topic that we discuss here on the Kev Baker Show often. And I like to get as many opinions, as many differing viewpoints from as many people as we can, because that way the listeners then, they've got so much kind of information that they can take, and that'll allow them to hopefully formulate a better opinion about what's going on. So what's your take on what's happening with the Pentagon?
I think it's incredibly interesting. I should tell a story quick because I used to be really interested in this idea of the government knowing things about UFOs that they're not telling people. And so I remember WikiLeaks used to release these like big bundles of documents, right? And they would have all these leaks where they would, release hundreds of thousands of documents all at one time, and you were able to search the documents with keywords. And I remember like little 14-year-old, 15-year-old me, I would be on WikiLeaks and I would be typing in the keyword search UFOs or aliens or things like that, trying to find some cool shit in the documents that I could, try to break some news that the government's out there, they know about aliens, they know about UFOs. I was so fascinated with Area 51, like boggled by it. I loved it. And then I see this news and I did some investigating with this because it's really interesting. Did you know that this isn't the first time that they've publicly announced a program like this?
Well, I would imagine if you go back to Project Blue Book, way back in the day when they were sending people around publicly, they weren't really hiding the fact that they were going investigating things. And coming from a military background, Brendan, the way I see it is, it's an absolute no-brainer that something that's unidentified in an airspace near military installations, it's obviously going to be investigated,
Yeah, that's what my logical brain tells me, right? That's what the one half, I have a half logical brain, and the half of my brain that's logical says it would make sense for a government to want to have a program like this where they investigate and put money towards investigating unidentified flying objects. And there's a good reason for that, I think. And maybe you can speak to this being in the military, being that you were in the military at one point. There's a stigma associated with reporting a UFO sighting. There just is. Okay, you just seem like a quack. You seem like a crazy person. I'm not saying you are a quack or a crazy person. I don't think that. But I'm saying you seem like one. When you go to your superior and you say, "Hey, I just saw a flying saucer. I just saw aliens." You seem like you and there's even a bigger stigma in the military because you're in a situation where you have to be sound in your brain. You have to be all together up there. And if you get people in the organization that start doubting you, then that's a problem, right? And so it makes sense that you would roll out a program like this so that you get rid of that stigma and you say, did you see something weird? If you saw something weird, report it and we'll investigate it. That makes sense to me, right? That's logical. And I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea because if you're a government, just like you were saying, if you're the United States government and you have the Air Force flying around in the United States airspace, and all of a sudden there's some weird looking thing that doesn't look like anything we've seen before, that is weird. It's like triangular, or it's a saucer, or it's circular, or it's some weird thing that you don't see very often in the airspace. It would make sense to report that, right? Because maybe Russia is working on some secret technology and they're flying around in our airspace undetected, or China, or whatever, and so it makes sense to roll out a program like this.
That's exactly the way I feel about it. I think it's a no-brainer. The only thing I wonder about, Brendan, is why are they telling us this now?
Well, I was going to bring this up because this is where my investigation has led me, if you want to call it that. I am not, by no means a journalist. By investigating, I mean a series of Google searches. Okay, that's modern day investigating.
That's what I like.
Right?
At least you're honest about it. These people that sit and claim to be, they're researchers. What, you've done a couple of Google searches. Big deal.
Yes, I do real scientific research. This was not that. Okay, this was Googling.
I'm a Google researcher. I hold my hands up.
Yes, everyone is, right? I mean that has single-handedly contributed to the doubting of science across the world. Is the fact that now people attribute research with Google, right? So now that they think that they can become experts if they just type in the right keywords into Google. And I'm not even saying you can't do that, because Wikipedia is really well developed in the scientific community. Generally, if you're in the scientific community and you need to know something, even if it's like the most complicated tensor algebra out there, like the highest form of mathematics, you can find a pretty good resource on Wikipedia. You just can, because it's really well developed. But that's not the point. The point is, there was a program like this that already existed back in 2007. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, the ATIP program?
And it ran through 2012. It ran for 5 years. And it got $22 million a year, I think is the figure, given to it by the Department of Defense. Okay. And it's a really interesting program. If you look into its origins, okay, it was pioneered by a guy named Harry Reid, and he was a Nevada Democrat. He doesn't matter. What matters is his affiliation, who he was affiliated with, okay? Almost all of the money of that program went to one company, an aerospace research company that was headed by a guy named Robert Bigelow. And Robert Bigelow is really interesting, okay? Because even though you and me, Kev, are coming up with this logical reason why the Pentagon would put money towards this, Robert Bigelow was interviewed about this program because he was one of the people who was really pushing for a program like this. And I wrote down his quote here because I think it's an interesting one. He said it was on 60 Minutes, right? So nationally syndicated news. He said he was absolutely convinced that aliens existed and that UFOs have visited us. So this program, right, even though our logical brain tells us that it was founded for reasons that you and I seem logical, it's very possible that it was founded because the people that found it honestly believed that there was some merit in searching for UFOs because you might be able to detect alien life. It's very possible that was the origins of the program. I don't know. What do you think about that?
See, this is why I like doing what I do, because I keep an open mind on all of it, and I can play devil's advocate. I can look at it from the far out kind of ufological kind of angle as well. And you know me, I think you know me by now anyway. I do speculate, and I do believe that there are craft either from outer space or probably more likely interdimensionally, just because of the vast areas in space and stuff like that, Brendan. It's obviously a physics that they're playing with that we don't know. And some of these videos that you do see coming, I was watching one the other day from the Nemesis, the USS Nemesis, and this was Nemesis, I think. I'll get the name of it in a moment anyway. But this was Top Gun fighter pilots telling you and showing you videos of things that they just don't kind of abide by the rules of physics. They're coming down from 24,000 feet to 50 feet above sea level in like 5 seconds. Some of them are then going under the water. And not only that, they're able to do these right angle turns just without even stopping. And there's no craft that we've got, or at least that we know about, that can do that. And even if it was able to do that, we would be like a fly on a windscreen if something tried to turn like that with us in it with a G-force. So for me, this has got to be the most exotic kind of technology that we've never heard about in some black program that we're likely never to learn about. And of course, the Navy personnel, they wouldn't be aware of these test craft, things like that. But I think actually it becomes more logical when you're looking at something defying physics, that it might be something from another world, another dimension. So I'm open to both.
Yeah, I try not to draw conclusions. It's interesting though for me to look at the origins of the project, right? Because the origins of the project may very well have been that a particular lawmaker thought that he could detect UFOs and that you should put money towards detecting UFOs. And by detecting UFOs, I mean detecting alien life. It's very possible that lawmakers had thought that behind closed doors, and they're pushing the law. I think it more than anything, it shows you that this is being discussed. This is being discussed when the public is not around. The government is sitting down and describing and talking about this and saying, man, there is some stuff going on in the air. So there's so many reports that, it's worth investigating. There's so many reports. There's like 8,000 reports a year coming out of the military of people seeing stuff. And now I would say 95% or more of those are nonsense. They're just a hot air balloon or a satellite or something. But 5% of them might have merit and they might be worth investigating. And I'm not saying they're aliens, but I'm saying, it's worth, just from a security standpoint, putting money towards it. I think it's a good idea.
No, absolutely. And of course, it's government, right? So speculating again here, but it's Harry Reid in this case, probably good friends with Mr. Bigelow, like we're talking about. And it could spin off into some research and development kind of programs coming from the government. Maybe, you know, Bigelow Aerospace will be tasked to do something down that line, and they end up getting a nice big brown envelope full of money. I'm very, very kind of suspicious when it comes to government. I truly am. And at the same time...
I agree.
Yeah.
Part of my brain, honestly, was thinking, wait a minute, was this program literally just invented so that we could find a way for the government to funnel $22 million to a company?
I mean, exactly, $22 million, you know, to investigate something that, you know, I mean, how much does it really cost to go and get the eyewitness reports, look at the kind of footage, if there is any recorded from the cockpit, stuff like that? 22 million, to me, where's that going? That sounds like one of these kind of a write-off of money. It really does.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is out of a $600 billion budget that the Department of Defense gets. And so, you know, it's one of those fishy things in government where, you know, this very well could be literally, you know, I'm not saying it is. I'm not trying to point fingers, but I'm saying it could feasibly be that these people are trying to find a way to funnel money. Because you'd be a fool to pretend that doesn't exist, right? That certainly exists. People undoubtedly in government find ways to funnel money to their friends' companies. I mean, that is like the premise for most modern day politics. That is the entire premise of lobbying. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if this is an example of that, and you would never notice 22 million missing out of 600 billion.
Exactly.
It's a drop in the bucket. So
plus, you've got this release of information you're talking about back in 2017. It was kind of closely aligned with, or the characters that came out ended up aligned with Tom DeLonge. Now, Tom DeLonge used to be the singer for Blink-182, and he's a really famous kind of UFO guy.
Yeah, I know his story well.
Yeah, because you find that the people that came out talking about ATIP, the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, Luis Elizondo, for one, he's now on the board of directors for Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy company. And it's not just Luis Elizondo with his connections to the Pentagon. You've got somebody called Harry Putoff. Now, he was working with the government and the CIA back around the time of The Men That Stare at Goats, that movie. Well, that was about a real incident, you know, when the army were looking into psi powers, stuff like that. And you can see that the board of directors on this company, and I'll get to why this company is relevant in a moment, but they all seem to have connections with government. Christopher Mellon, he's another one. He was on Fox News just the other day talking about all of this. And they've got this TV show called Unidentified coming out on the History Channel. But the reason I bring them into it here, in particular with you, is because they work closely with Bigelow Aerospace. And Bigelow Aerospace, apparently, according to them, has this kind of almost exotic technology. Now, they make it very vague. I'm not sure if it comes from this world or if it's cutting-edge technology from our world. But I wonder if that's where the $22 million went. And then if you've got this hype about UFOs, maybe it's easier to lobby for more money, more research to be done on this topic in the years to come. So it's almost like a constant payoff coming from government into these companies.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, I haven't looked into this company, the Bigelow's company, but I am very well versed in the aerospace world. I have a guy on my podcast every month who's an ISS flight controller. He's a good friend of mine. I bring him on, and he updates my audience and me about everything new in the aerospace industry. And I have never one time heard of this company. I don't know what they do. I don't know what product they push. I don't know what involvement they have with I know they work with NASA. They have some NASA contracts, but I don't know what they are. And maybe you could find all this information out. I'm blatantly saying I haven't looked into it, but just the fact that I haven't heard of it is weird.
We are on the break. We'll come back on the other side. We've got lots more to come with Brendan Drachler, thestateoftheuniverse.com. Don't go anywhere. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. We are live. And I've got Brendan Drachler here with me today. How you doing, Brendan?
I'm good, man. I'm loving the UFO talk.
Yeah, we're having some strange kind of Skype glitches there during the break and things. So I don't know if
They're
it's
trying to bring us down, Kev.
that's what it is, dude. I think
We're onto something.
I think you might be right. You know, first time ever, the Men in Black might be actually onto my podcast. But before the break, now we were talking about the recent news from the Pentagon, how they are inevitably, well, they're now admitting that they investigate UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. They don't call them UFOs, things like that. And myself and Brendan, we both agree that this has been going on forever, and it doesn't matter if it's the Pentagon. It would be the Ministry of Defence over here, and any nation is going to be interested in any foreign object, any alien object that they can't identify that's either in their airspace or close to one of their installations. It's a no-brainer. It could be China, it could be Russia, and tonight we're keeping our minds open because it could be something from way, way, way further afield. It could be something from one of those other many worlds out there if you're into my quantum outlook at reality. But I'm really loving the conversation. We were talking about Bigelow Aerospace before the break. We weren't really too sure what they were into, Brendan, because they're a company that you hear very little about, to be honest with you.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, so we both had to do our research, our Google research during the break, and it turns out the most exciting thing I can see them working on is kind of it doesn't even make sense. It's like little compartments that build space stations, inflatable space stations.
See, this is one of the weird things, right? It's like they probably work on some confidential stuff that they don't just have on their website.
Yeah.
Right? But you know, it seems weird when you have a company that does what they do. And again, we've only looked into them. This is an important preface. We've only looked into them for 5 minutes.
Yep.
But it just came up in the conversation. And what's weird, and we discussed this, is that they don't seem to be working in a field that would make $22 million for investigating UFO sightings relevant. It seems weird.
Exactly. I mean, even say there was like some crashed object that came down, hypothetically, it's not as if, you know, some company that's making inflatable space stations really, they don't, in my mind, have the kind of stuff that could back engineer, say, propulsion systems or anything like that. It doesn't even make sense, Brendan.
Yeah, it's so weird. You know, and the other thing that's weird is like I don't have a good handle on how much aerospace technology-wise is classified. A lot of it is generally public. If you're talking about the big companies, if you're talking about a lot of the large NASA collaborators, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, they generally publicize their stuff pretty well. And part of the reason is because they do make a lot of money. SpaceX in particular makes a lot of money, a lot of revenue off of essentially crowdsourcing, essentially just being a profitable company in the media. Why do you think they launched a Tesla into space? That was literally a PR move in order to get more money, you know? So it seems weird. It seems weird that this company is so private. I've never heard of them. I have no handle on what they do. And yet they get money for detecting UFOs. Well, honestly, to me, my brain, I'll tell you what I think, Kev. I'll tell you, and I think isn't even a good word. I'll tell you what comes to my mind. I don't believe that they somehow have secret alien technology. I more so believe that they're getting money given to them because they have friends in high places, if you will. And the relationship there is very easily seen between the two figures we talked about earlier.
Well, if we were to go Occam's razor on that, I think I would probably have to agree with you there. There's far more chance that this is about scamming money than investigating anything to do with alien technology or little grey or green or purple or even blue chicken men that might be out there. Here's something interesting as well, and it came up during our conversation during the break, and the listeners know I like to keep an eye on DARPA, the defense kind of research projects that they come out with. And of course, they're interested in space, Brendan. And recently, I was looking at something called the Launch Challenge. And there's 3 companies competing in this Launch Challenge. One of them's called Virgin Orbit. The other one's called Vector. And there's another company. Only I can't tell you who that company is because they're going by the name Stealth And it says here a third company which has requested anonymity for the first few months of the challenge. So could it be this Bigelow Aerospace? Could it be them? Could it be SpaceX? I wouldn't see why SpaceX would keep themselves secret. They like to publicize everything, as the Blue Origin. Weird one, dude. Weird. But you know, all of this, whatever's going on, you know what all of it ties into? A potential new space race.
Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
Because like I started with that video, the test of the new Omega first stage rocket from Northrop Grumman. I mean, we're seeing now that there's a lot of money going into this. We're seeing the launch of these satellites by Musk lately, talk of colonies on the moon, talk of colonies on Mars. This is like the next big industrial revolution, perhaps.
Yeah, it is an interesting time. It truthfully, I think I'm safe to say this. It is the most interesting time in the history of spaceflight. It really is. Did you see the Blue Origin unveiled their new lunar lander?
Yes, I did.
Known as Blue Moon?
Yep, and I also seen Elon Musk trolling it, where he stroked out the moon and put balls underneath it. So
I didn't see this.
Yeah, it was on Twitter, man.
That's the PR move we're talking about again. Yeah. There's a reason that you saw Elon Musk do Joe Rogan's podcast and you didn't see any other figures in the aerospace world do Joe Rogan's podcast or any publicity. And it's because SpaceX relies heavily on word of mouth in order to grow their company.
Yeah.
If you ask people out there, name aerospace organizations, most people will be able to tell you NASA, and the second most would be SpaceX. Essentially, none of the other ones would even come to mind, right? So that's what they do. Did you ask a question, by the way? I just sort of started rambling.
No, I was just talking about the fact that there's probably going to be, you know, a space race, which will create, you know, almost like a kind of a boom in the industry, right?
Yeah, what I see happening, there's two things happening actually in the world of space race, if you will. There's a private race, and there is a government race going on behind the scenes a little bit, and that's evident because, you know, the NASA recently came out with I think they're calling it now Project Artemis. They've given it a name. And it is their plan to get men or women on the moon by 2024. And this is a big deal. This is 5 years from now. Okay? And the reason 2024 should be very apparent to everyone. The reason 2024 is because if Donald Trump wins his election, he would love nothing more than to be considered the man to put men back on the moon. That would be a giant reason for us going there. And if you don't think that that's a giant reason for us getting back there by 2024, then you need to freshen up on your history of political motivations for spaceflight, because political motivations have governed the history of spaceflight more so than I could even explain. But this is undoubtedly a move, a very clever move, and one I agree with. I'm fine with it. I don't care who puts us back there. I want to get back there. I don't care if it's Donald Trump. I don't care if it's, you know, whatever idiot replaces him. I don't care. I just want to get back there.
Absolutely agree with you, dude. And of course, we've got the Chinese. They've got their Chang'e missions.
Yes.
We've seen the lander. And they're going back, aren't they?
This is an important point because, you know, China does something that we don't. We have a big problem here in the United States with our space flight industry, NASA. We have a big problem. The problem is every time a new politician takes office, every time a new president takes office, they overhaul NASA's mission. And so it takes these people, these poor engineers who are working on projects and have been for 4 years or 8 years and makes them just drop everything and start new projects. And this is evident if you look at the Bush administration. They really wanted to get back to the moon. They had a big push, get us back on the moon. Then Barack Obama came in and he said, no, we don't need to go to the moon. It's not interesting. Let's scrap that and let's go to Mars right away. So then we start putting infrastructure into getting to Mars. 8 years go by, and then Donald Trump comes in and he says, well, we don't need to go to Mars. Instead, why don't we go back to the moon? And so you have this constant flip-flopping of ideas, and it leaves many people and NASA as an organization just seeming kind of confused. Like, could we get a long-term plan here? Could we just get something long term where we could actually put effort and focus and be efficient for one thing for like a decade or 2 decades? And that's what you see China doing. And this should be a wake up call for America, because China is working on those Chang'e missions. And what does that stand for? China Lunar Exploration Program. They've been working on this, and they've been rolling out rovers and rolling out landers, and they've been doing it efficiently. And they keep going, and they have a plan set out for the next 20 years where they want to get this done, then they want to get this done, then they want to do this, then they're moving on to this, and they've stuck with that plan. And it's been very successful for them, because that's what happens when you stick with a plan and you get efforts to focus on a singular plan, and you get funding to focus on a singular plan, and you don't flip-flop all over. And I think that we're beginning to wake up and realize that we should set something in stone and not change it every time someone new takes office. And China wants to get on the moon in the 2030s. They're taking it slow. They're taking it slow for a reason. They want to go slow. They want to do it right. America, we don't necessarily have that option, because if Donald Trump came out and he said, or NASA administrators came out and said, I want to get us back on the moon by 2032, well, that's never going to happen, because, in 2024 or in 2020, whenever Donald Trump is removed from office, there will be a new politician who came in and changed that and say, nah, let's go to Venus. No, let's build something and send it to the sun. Let's, and constantly switch. So it's imperative that if this is done, I think it is very important that it be done by 2024.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I totally kind of concur with your reasoning there. And it doesn't seem like that long ago when, Obama he was taking money back from NASA. And now there's almost this excitement about space again. And I like the excitement about space. And these private companies, private industry as well, that's really going to push things forward in the US, I believe. And there's probably more chance of them getting things done, Brendan, than the government, because we know how government works. You kind of hit a few points there, but if there's any way for something to get messed up, the best way to do that is involve government. They always seem to make a mess of things.
Exactly, right. The great thing about commercializing space is the fact that it's commercial, and then it has to obey the laws of economics. And government is essentially a monopoly, right? NASA was very much a monopoly in terms of American spaceflight. They were the only person in town, and they were engineered to be that way. And because of that, they had no real incentive to get places fast and efficiently. You did during the space race because you had a competitor. Competition is very important. That's why the commercial companies, that's why the private companies are moving so damn fast. There's competition. You need competition in the marketplace in order for you to move efficiently, in order for you to get shit done. And sorry, Kev, I don't know what curses are and are not allowed on
that's
platform.
Okay. That's tame. That's very tame. Yes.
We're good. Yeah.
Yes.
But this is a great thing. I am completely down with this. I think it's wonderful. I love to see it. And I think we need to be careful as we go forward with how much we rely on private companies. We don't want to back ourselves into a corner where now all of a sudden, why was NASA so slow in terms of space flight for the past decade? Well, because we had to rely on Russia for everything.
Yeah, you don't want
SpaceX
holding off like some kind of a resupply mission to the ISS or some future space station over an argument over money,
Yes, that's why NASA is, even though they have private companies that can get them to space, they are still in the process of developing their own technologies, because they're trying to prevent that from happening. They're trying to prevent SpaceX from saying, hey, we could get you guys the ISS, but we're going to need $50 million a seat. They want to avoid that from happening. And I'm not saying that would happen, but it's something that you should definitely plan for.
You know what I think? And it might sound a bit kind of a pipe dream, a bit kumbaya, a bit utopic, but how about a global program, Brendan? We all come together. And by now we should be colonizing the moon. We should be doing experiments up there. We should be learning more about our near kind of space around us, our own solar system. It's a no-brainer. And, let's try a different model from the one that went wrong down here so horribly, where we stay divided because of lines on a map and because of different national anthems and different flags. Let's really start anew. And like I say, do it with China. Do it with Russia. we see how in science it's the perfect example of how borders and countries and differences, they get left at the door. So I think as we venture off this blue marble, I think that'd be a really kind of better attitude to go forth with.
I agree with you 1,000%. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I think that is exactly what should be done. And you see that a little bit. You have Japan is already one of our early collaborators that plans on working with us to get American people and Japanese people on the moon by 2024. They're working with us to do that. And China has held off, and I'm not sure if internally that is there's an American reason for that, or if it's on the Chinese side. I don't know. I don't know which end it falls on. In fact, that's maybe something that I can talk to some of my guests about in the future. I will have next week. I have maybe the most intelligent man in the history of space flight documentation, Dr. David Fisher. He is literally an encyclopedia in the world of space flight. So I'll try to ask him about that, because I don't know what's holding it up. I don't know what is preventing, countries like China and Russia and the United States from putting together a conceded effort and working together on this. Other than political division, I don't know if there's a reason.
God forbid we should all come together and get on, Brendan,
It's, man, it's so weird. It's
Isn't
so
it?
weird, but I think we will come to a point. We'll have to come to a point in our future, whether it's 1,000,000 years from now, whether it's 1,000, whether it's 1,000,000,000, where we come together and we say, hey, guess what, guys? We can't live on this planet anymore. It's going to either we've destroyed it, which might be possible, or it's going to be destroyed through some inevitable natural circumstance. So we need to go, and we need to go somewhere else. And hopefully when that time comes, we have the technology to go, and we can agree that it's not just Americans going or Russians going or the Chinese going, but it's the humans going. And they take this diverse subset of people and they ship them off to a different planet in a different solar system on some different region in the galaxy. And I hope that that is the thing that brings us all together, because it might very well be that the end of the Earth is the thing that finally unites us all. It's depressing, but that might literally be what's required.
Absolutely. And, I talk about artificial intelligence a lot. Usually when it comes to space, I'm thinking about the information when it comes to all these radio telescopes around the world, all of that data, looking for the hidden gems, exoplanets, things like that. We're going to get into that in the second part of the show. But we can also look at AI in manufacturing and research. And my question to you would be, do you think AI is going to cause an escalation, an acceleration in the way that we're looking at space propulsion, for example, spacecraft, possible colonization out there? Do you think that's going to give us the next big leap?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to explore, like in the immediate future, or, maybe the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, artificial intelligence and like robots, literal robots or nanobots, will be the only way that we'll be able to do things like explore the first exoplanet, like actually explore it, go there. That the only way that we'll be able to do that is with artificial intelligence and nanobots, because that's the only thing we'll be able to accelerate at a high enough speed. And the artificial intelligence comes into play in case you have to maneuver. If you need to train some AI to be able to actually navigate a dangerous airspace. The current idea is that if you just take enough nanobots, like 1,000, and you accelerate them all towards the nearest star system to try to get pictures of exoplanets up close, that's the way to do it, because you'll lose some, but some will make it there. That's not a long-term solution, I don't think. I think eventually we're going to have to begin to train AI with the use of things like machine learning to identify threats in front of them and navigate around them, because eventually we're going to want to send these things off in every direction, and we're not going to be at a point where we're going to be able to send millions of them off. That's not going to be something that maybe is feasible to do. So it's going to be to the point where we have to start making them intelligent and sending them off. And yeah, I think that's where we'll see the immediate future go, because humans suck at traveling long distances.
You see, here's the thing. We can flip this round as well, right? Because think about it. We started off this kind of conversation talking about the Pentagon and the fact that they are now admitting that they investigate these rogue, these unexplained objects in the sky. And like you just said there, the way we would go about investigating exoplanets, things like that, is we would undoubtedly, I agree with you wholeheartedly, it's got to be AI, it's going to be robots, things like that, just because of, like you say, the distances involved, the speeds traveled, things like that. So would it be realistic then, or logical to think, logical, that's a better word, to think, if there are other civilizations out there on other planets, that they would possibly have to go the same route, especially if they're a biological intelligence, because, you know, it doesn't seem to me that space travel at near the speed of light is going to be conducive for any kind of biological kind of skin suit or reptilian suit or whatever form it comes in, Brendan. So I would imagine that it's going to be a similar contact here. And you see some of these sightings, especially from the Navy, the ones they've been talking about, and it is more like probes as opposed to big motherships or anything like that. Just orbs, tic-tacs, they call some of them. And it makes me wonder if that's what we're looking at here. You know, some other civilization probing us, sending their technology to send back information about some exoplanet that they happen to detect in our solar system.
Yes, if we are limiting our use of Occam's razor to only scenarios involving aliens, then that's the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
Right? The most likely scenario, if we're in the realm of talking about aliens, then the most likely scenario is that you would send some form of robot here, some form of artificial intelligence. You wouldn't, you know, because like you say, they're not going to get here by using the physics that we understand today.
No.
They're just not. You traveling, not only is traveling across the galaxy rather impossible, it's possible. It's not completely impossible. If you could develop a technology feasibly that could accelerate you to large fractions of the speed of light, then you could shoot yourself across the galaxy, and you could do it in a feasible amount of time. You could do it in a decent amount of time. The physics is there. It's evident. You just have to figure out a way to generate energy to be able to do that.
To be able to do it, that's all.
Yeah, so you could do that, but then you have a problem. The problem is, of course, time dilation. This is the biggest problem with space travel at near the speed of light. And the problem is that if I leave here, if you and I get in a spaceship, Kev, and we take off the flat Earth and we leave the flat Earth behind, and we travel to our nearest neighbor galaxy, Andromeda, and we shoot ourselves over there, nearest major galaxy, I should say, and we shoot ourselves over there at a high fraction of the speed of light, then we might think we get there. I'm making these numbers up, but let's say we get there in 10 years in our time, because we're going really fast. And when you go really fast, Einstein's special theory of relativity tells you that space contracts. So you would feasibly travel through less space if you're going really fast, like a fraction of the speed of light, a large fraction. So we would get there in 10 years. Okay, the problem is, of course, time dilation, which is another mysterious thing that happens when you travel at high speeds. Time dilation says that clocks do not tick at the same rate for all observers. So while we're on our spaceship traveling at a high speed, we would recognize that a second is 1 second. 1 second for you is 1 second for me, because we're on the same spacecraft, we're traveling at the same speed. Time is perfectly fine within our reference frame. Everything's good. 10 years have passed. We would both agree on that. But then we would come back to the Earth in the 20-year round trip, and we would look around and things would be very different. We would be confused. We'd be like, what the hell is going on here? Well, it's because in the reference frame of the Earth, in the time it took us to go those 20 years, clocks here on Earth have ticked much, 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 much more, and millions of years have passed. Okay, so then we get back and our family's dead, our best friends are dead, our governments are probably dead. We don't even have a home anymore. We are very much aliens. So yeah, that's it's a fallacy. It's a weird fallacy that will prevent us from any rational person from wanting to actually travel large distances, because you're getting back to nothing. And that's another reason that we'll employ robots, because you don't want to lose your whole family just to go to the nearest star. You don't want to come back and have everyone you've ever known dead because you wanted to travel to the nearest star system. So it's complicated.
Yeah, we're going to have to break the laws of physics as we know them, because, like you say, it's just not feasible. It just isn't. It doesn't even get off the drawing board. And I don't know if it's at all possible. I don't know if it's in the realms of my sci-fi kind of speculation I like to go to. But if anything, it's got to be interdimensional. You have to pop out of this dimension into somewhere where there's no time or something and come out the other end.
There's got to be some wormhole or
it's something
black
highly
hole travel.
Something that we don't know about yet. Some faster than light travel. We'll be back on the other side, folks, with more from Brendan Drachler, thestateoftheuniverse.com. Don't go anywhere. Hour number 2 with our very special guest today, my good friend Brendan Drachler from the State of the Universe podcast. You can check out his website, same thing, all one word, thestateoftheuniverse.com. I urge you all to check that out. And after a pretty rough blast off at the start of the show, we escaped Earth's atmosphere. We're in lower Earth orbit now. We're going to fire up our new telescope, the James Webb telescope. We've got access to it. It's up there. And we're looking at exoplanets now, Brendan, because we were talking about space propulsion and things before the break. And now one of the favourite topics of mine to look at, and of course now with AI we're starting to find more and more, are these little kind of Goldilocks zone planets. Just warm enough, just wet enough for human life. And you look at all the kind of billions of galaxies out there, and you start to do the math about all the kind of individual kind of solar systems and planets that might or might not exist. And in my mind, that's got to lead to a good few options for us, for a planet, a second Earth, somewhere that is just like here, maybe just a little bit different, but it's got the right oxygen, it's got water, it's got all of the kind of particles and physics as we know it. What do you think the chances are of us finding one of them sometime soon?
I am very excited for the future of exoplanetary research, where we can actually start to detect if some of these exoplanets have atmospheres, if they have what are called biosignatures, meaning they have an atmosphere with the constituents that we rely on, or whether they have magnetic fields or these sorts of things, because that it really is an interesting prospect. What also interests me is terraforming. Is the idea of going to a planet that might not be perfect for us and having the technology to make it perfect for us. That's another sort of interesting concept down the pipe.
I think terraforming, I think that's the way we're probably going to have to go, because I don't think we'll find a planet close enough by for us to really move to. It's just optimal for us to hop onto, so to speak. And I think it's probably more likely we'll find one that we can engineer ourselves, maybe kind of get things going. And you look at Mars, and you've got Elon Musk, and you look at the long-term plans there, and terraforming does come into that. So I think that's probably the natural progression of things, as opposed to finding that one that's just like Earth.
Yeah, I think nature has given us, if I was a religious man, I would say God has given us something very special here. But I think nature has gifted us with something, and that's that we have Mars next door, which is, a kind of a small planet, which doesn't really have an appreciable atmosphere and doesn't necessarily have the right constituents for us to live, and is pretty cold. It gets warm sometimes, but generally it's pretty cold. And then on the other side, our other next door neighbor, we have Venus, which is literally the opposite. It's too close. It has a runaway greenhouse effect. It has a huge atmosphere. And so we literally have two planets with two different problems and the ability to try to terraform either of them. So we have good training here in our neighborhood. If we want to get into the business of terraforming, we have two perfect candidates next door.
No, absolutely. And I was just looking at the name of something there, because this terraforming, I like my sci-fi. And there's a book called Children of Time, and it's by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this deals with the near future, the distant future, in fact, where we've left Earth and scientists have been looking for viable planets that they can terraform and then seed intelligent life. That they've got a virus that will basically speed up the genetic process, you know. But in this, it goes horribly wrong because as opposed to the monkeys that are meant to get this virus, this upgrade genetically, however it happens, it actually goes into arachnid life forms, and it's spiders that end up with a level of intelligence, and they actually colonize the planet. And
I would kill myself.
It cleverly deals with the science involved, and then the relationship that we, the future kind of travelers from Earth, come into this planet that we're meant to colonize it, how we actually have to integrate with that other intelligent life form. Intelligent on a whole different level than what our intelligence is, but intelligent all the same.
I'm not a genocidal person, Kev, but if you show me a planet full of spiders, I'm killing them.
Yeah, I'm with you as well.
Okay?
Yeah, it makes my skin
crawl.
because
now I'm like afraid that there's like a spider behind me or something. Whoa, don't be talking about spiders. Jeez. You're gonna freak me out. But it's a very that's one of the things that's so interesting about traveling out amongst the stars is that we're not gonna find things like us. We're just not. And so it's interesting that how, historically, white people haven't even been able to get along with black people. Something so insignificant as the color of one's skin has kept us from really forming tight bonds. And we see that fading away, but we still have things that drive us apart, like religious beliefs and nationalities, things like that. So it is a problem we're going to have to address. And we're going to have to be good at it here first before we go somewhere else.
So right now, Brendan, as it stands, how are we actually detecting these exoplanets? Because I believe we look for almost, is it the dimming of a local star or a star, and that gives rise to, the chance that maybe it's a planet in transit across that star. Is that how they do it?
Yes, almost every exoplanet discovery is done now with the transit method, which means we just have telescopes. Used to be Kepler. Kepler had detected something like 3,600, I think it was, exoplanets in its database. It still has tons of other exoplanets in its database that haven't yet been really analyzed thoroughly because there's just so many of them and not enough humans to do it. So we try to do that sort of thing with AI and machine learning, but it really does at this stage require some human intervention to get these things right. And so we still have a database of thousands of planets waiting to be confirmed or denied from Kepler, and now we're rolling out TESS, which is the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Spacecraft, something like that. So it doesn't matter. The point is, it looks for transits. It looks at stars and it stares at them, and it stares at them for a good amount of time, and it tries to see, is any of the light coming from that star dimming? Is it dimming appreciably? Is it dimming to the point where we should be suspicious of it? And if it is, then we can suspect that there might be a planet going across it, literally transiting it, eclipsing it, and blocking some of the light coming to us from it. And so that's what we look for. And TESS is this awesome spacecraft that has cameras that essentially point almost throughout the entire hemisphere as it goes in orbit, and it can see a real wide field, and it's studying thousands of stars, and it's real cutting edge, and it hasn't been operating long, but it's already found, I think it's something like 600 potential candidates.
Now, is that able to then look at the atmosphere to see if it's viable? What kind of chemicals, what kind of gases are there?
I don't think it's particularly designed to do it. I'm not confident in that. I'm fairly confident in that answer, that it's not designed particularly to analyze atmospheres. That is generally done with you mentioned James Webb. James Webb will be used in the exoplanetary research because it might be able to get better resolution than any of our other telescopes at looking at doing some direct imaging of exoplanets. And when we start doing direct imaging of exoplanets, we can start getting things like spectra.
I watched them.
Spectra of light.
I watched them putting together parts of this kind of the James Webb. And for anyone out there who's into technology, who's a bit of a geek like me, this is fascinating, folks. I urge you go and check this out. And they were putting together some of the mirrors on there, and the precision that they're going to, I'm in awe of the technology, and if it gives us a bigger leap forward, as the scientists seem to think so, and I've got no reason to doubt them, then this is going to be a game changer, right?
Yes, I had the fortunate ability to visit the James Webb Space Telescope in the clean room down at NASA Goddard.
Wow.
In 2017, I was down there, and I got the opportunity to see it, to actually see the completed thing, and it was, and I say completed loosely because there's still a lot that doesn't have to be completed, but the main structural component was completed. They're always in the process of revision and making sure that they can ship it without breaking anything, and then making sure they can launch it without breaking anything, and then making sure that it can deploy without breaking anything. And it's a fascinating. It's a monster. It's ginormous, and it has something like, it's so big that you can't launch it the way it is. It literally folds up. There's fantastic videos that you could look up, Kev, if you'd like, that show how this thing would unfold. And it has to, because in order for you to fit it on a rocket and launch it into space, it has to be a little bundle. And then once it gets to where it's going, which is something on the order of 1 million miles away from here, it will then unfold into this huge structure. And it'll unfold all of its solar panels and its mirrors and its structure and something like 80 plus components that have to move. So it not only has to go very far away in space, it then has to unfold 80 moving parts, and it has to be done just perfectly. And if one mistake is made, it's gone. You're not getting it back. You cannot fix it. Hubble had a problem when it launched, but Hubble was repairable. It's close to Earth. It's in Earth orbit. James Webb will not be. It is going to a Lagrange point, as it's called, which is a place that you can essentially park things in space. When you study gravity from even a very introductory level, you learn about things called Lagrange points, and they are essentially places where the gravitational effects of the Earth and the Sun cancel one another out. So you could literally park something there. And there's 5 Lagrange points, and they're in very particular locations. If you've ever heard of the Trojan asteroids that follow and that go in front of and follow Jupiter, those are asteroids that are literally just parked right in Jupiter's orbit, and they're not going anywhere. And they have the ability to just sort of hang out there freely. And we plan on putting the James Webb right there in the, I believe it's the L2 point, Lagrange 2 point. And we're going to park it there, and it's going to unfold. And if one mistake occurs, it's gone. There's no getting it back. And for this reason, there's, a lot of people in government and outside of government that say, do not waste your money on this thing. This is billions of dollars that could go wrong. But if it goes right, then you all of a sudden have the greatest telescope ever manufactured by human beings.
Oh, dude, imagine that if you were on that mission, watching that thing going up there, unfolding, doing its thing. That'd be enough to give you a heart attack, man.
Yes. There are people working on that are literally losing years of their life.
And you're talking about one speck of dust would be enough to kind of really mess things up on those mirrors and things, aren't you?
Yeah, the clean room at NASA Goddard is insane. It's insane. The place where they actually do the building, they have this awesome clean room. It's one of the biggest in the world, and it's ginormous, and all of the people in it are in the bunny suits, as they're called, where they're in this like literal hazmat gear, because even a human hair on one of these mirrors could muck it up. And so in this clean room they have essentially a giant wall that is just an air conditioner. It's just one giant air conditioner, if you will, and it's blowing air in, and it's blowing the cleanest air, like literally nothing in this air. And they're blowing it across and the reason they do this is so that if you drop a hair, if somehow hair gets out of your suit and falls down, it won't have a chance to land on anything because it's literally being swept across the room. They're just blasting this air in. And these people are down there working, and they're sewing, and they're clean
This looks
suits.
like somewhere you would have an alien autopsy. It's that clean, dude.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean, I'm
it's
looking at the pictures now, and yeah, I mean, it is. You talk about the guys with the kind of little suits on and things. This is really, this is state of the art It's probably the most sterile place on Earth.
It's one of them. And then the way that they've designed this air system, this system that cleans the room, so that even if you drop a piece of dust, it will be blown to the other side and sucked away into a sort of a vacuum type contraption. It's incredible. It is literally one of the cleanest places on Earth. And we were there, and it was so interesting. I had asked the question of someone who worked there. I said, "Have you ever, found something in the clean room that was, surprised you or took you aback?" And they said this happened, about a decade ago when regulations weren't so severe and the James Webb wasn't being built yet. They found a French fry in there, and they were like, "What? What the hell? How could this have?" And then they tried investigating how the hell they never did find out, from my understanding, that a French fry just appeared on the ground in the clean room. And so you not only have to be very careful, you have to rely on your employees to not take French fries into the damn clean room.
There's always one. There's always one. That Joe Joseph I work with here on the network, he'd be the guy sneaking fries in. Absolutely. So what do you think, are we ever going to get that conclusive evidence from, be it the James Webb or some other piece of technology and scientists out there, that yes, they have found a planet, and secondly, there is some kind of life on it? Do you think we're getting closer to that?
I think we're getting closer to the technology to be able to detect life. But one of the interesting things that you find by studying humans is that we hate each other. And I'm curious how long our civilization will survive. If it is indefinite, or if, it has a half-life. And then we kill ourselves. It might literally be in our nature to just kill each other, and there's no way around it. And I'm curious for what the future holds. If it turns out that we can live a very long time without murdering each other, and we can somehow find a way to unite and stop waging war for stupid things like money and oil, then maybe we can live long enough, and maybe that means other civilizations can live long enough too, and then we would get to the point where we can start detecting one another. But a good question is, how many civilizations become into being and then taper off due to war? And
look how many times civilization has risen and fallen in our own brief history. And I say brief history when you're talking about cosmic terms here, So it's almost like, just as with everything out there in space being cyclical, they're all in orbits, things like that. I feel like humanity, and I can't talk about any other species or races out there that may or may not have sprung up, but we seem to be in cycles as well. And unless we can break this level of thinking that we always do seem to repeat, i.e. the wars, the money, the religion, things like that, Brendan, then unfortunately, it might sound pessimistic, but I do think we're doomed just to rise and fall. And, whether we ever do make it to that level 2, level 3, whatever the Galactic Federation of Planets call it when you leave your own rock, that's up in the air for me. It really is. We need a totally different level of thinking.
Yeah, I think one of the, in terms of actually detecting, I would not be surprised, honestly, if we sometime in my lifetime detect radio emissions from a different civilization off somewhere in the universe. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, it would not surprise me, because when you study this stuff, and we've talked about it on here, Kev, the magnitude of the universe is so big that I honestly cannot fathom the idea that we are it. I can't.
But then think of how accurate we've got to be, right? We've got to be looking at that precise star at that precise time. And even if we do receive radio signals or any kind of detect any life there, with our current technology, then the chances of that life still even being there at that point, pretty remote. And whether we could ever communicate back 2 ways with something that we've never dealt with before, that's another ball game altogether, right? So even finding out doesn't really take us much closer to that kind of a contact moment, does it?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with the second thing you said, but not as much with the first thing you said. Because the first thing you said is that we would have to be looking at the right location, and I agree with you completely. But we've gotten to a point with radio telescopes where at any given time, we are looking at pretty large areas of the sky. And of course, the Earth is rotating, and so the areas of the sky that we're looking at are changing. And, I don't know if anyone's done these sorts of calculations, but my guess would be that over the course of a decade, we look at essentially every part of the sky. And in doing so, civilizations don't just shut off their emission, right? We as soon as we started emitting radio waves, we haven't stopped to this day. Every single thing we do is just streaming off into space, whether it's TV transmissions, cell phone transmissions, the music you get on your radio, us right now, streaming off into interstellar space. And so, while scanning the entire sky, we would eventually come upon some emission, and that emission we wouldn't have to be lucky to find it because it would always be there. We could just tune in, point our telescope in the right spot, and there it is again. So I think that, the actual aspect of detecting the emission would happen maybe more easily than you'd think.
Yeah, when you explain it like that, absolutely. It's almost like there'll be a light going on, and then we can focus all of our attention on that light. Yeah, I definitely, I get that now. But it's that whole communication barrier as well, and the time barrier, how we would ever do anything about that contact, right? Again, it's like traveling at light speed. It's just not feasible.
Exactly. So, like, even if there was life in our nearest neighbor, our nearest star system, even if there was life over there, the communication time would be 8 years in order to get a message there and get one back. So, in the course of an average human lifetime, you might be able to communicate 10 times. And the problem with communicating 10 times with a civilization that you don't know is that the first few communications are going to have to be like setting some ground rules or actually finding a way to talk, which is going to be the hardest part. So,
the way our world's going, Mark Zuckerberg would probably offer them a Facebook profile so we could communicate with them that way.
Yeah. Galaxy book? I don't know.
Multiple faces book? I have no idea.
Social media for the entire maybe that's the future.
Oh, don't even say that. It's bad enough having social media on our rock, let alone taking it out into space with us, dude. That terrifies me.
Yeah. Man. We would start canceling entire civilizations for not having the correct political views.
I sometimes wonder as well if, a planet more advanced than us, older than us, wiser than us, I would hope, in this kind of a hypothetical scenario. But it could be that they realize that one of the detection systems, or one of the way that other civilizations can detect them, is their emissions of radio waves, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they might actually have found a way around that. I'm talking about something way more advanced than us that are aware of that kind of bleed through, that kind of makes them stand out like a sore thumb.
Yes, there feasibly is a way to shut it off. If you handle it right and you find a way to contain emissions, then you could shut it off, or you could develop new technology that doesn't rely on, like actual transmission through the air using photons. Then feasibly you could shut it off.
And in your experience, I mean, you've gone around some of the telescopes, things like that. I imagine you spoke to people that are on some of these projects as well. I mean, we hear about the wow moment at SETI. Have you spoke to anyone that's had any kind of episode where they've thought, wow, here we go, this could be the one?
The one that immediately comes to mind is the first detection of a fast radio burst.
Yeah.
And I had the person behind that, Duncan Lorimer, I had him on my show, and we talked about that. And I brought up the wow signal to him. And I said, in your expertise, could the wow signal have been a fast radio burst? And he said no. He said it did not have the correct parameters. It did not have the correct, structure to be a fast radio burst in FRB. It was something different. Whether it was an anomaly, whether it was a weird blip in the data, whether it was aliens, whatever, it wasn't a fast radio burst. And so his experience with detecting that fast radio burst was very much, I asked him, like, did it ever come to your mind? Did you ever think aliens? And he didn't come out right and say that he had thought that, but I get the impression that he was holding it back, because how could you not? Of course you have to think that. You just see a little blip. It doesn't resemble anything you've ever seen before. Of course you think aliens. You're like, man, I
And
found them.
again, it
I
goes
got
back
them.
to what we were saying at the start, right? You know, you've got commercial airline pilots, you've got people in the military, and I suppose people in, you know, high positions within academia, within science as well. It's that stigma that's attached the minute you say alien
Hmm.
or extraterrestrial, and perhaps that's what kind of made them hesitant to say that.
Yeah, it's very possible. Do you know the story of the first detection of a pulsar? Are you familiar with this?
No, I don't think I am, and we'll get that on the
So,
other side of the break because we're almost
sure.
going to break. But Brendan, where can people find out more about your podcast? Because you have some of the leading scientists coming on there. Tell people where they can find out more.
Go to thestateoftheuniverse.com. All one word. Do not go to stateoftheuniverse.com. Make sure you put the, okay? I have people make this mistake. I'm available everywhere. Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. Literally everywhere. If there's a podcast platform out there, I'm pretty much on it. Okay, there might be some tiny ones I'm not on, but I do my best to network and make sure I'm on every single one of them. I do my best to conduct outreach in ideally a amusing and fun way. I understand that sometimes science can be boring as hell. Okay, especially when you have certain people that are doing the outreach or the interviews, but I do my best to liven it up. And you can check it out. And I encourage you to subscribe on YouTube, rate on Apple Podcasts, whatever you got to do. I would really appreciate if you gave it a shot. I have some of the like Kev was saying, I have Nobel laureates. I have the discovery of the first fast radio burst ever.
We are back. We are live. Brendan Drachler, an astrophysics student from the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I love chilling out with Brendan here because he can really keep me right when it comes to one of my favourite subjects, and that is space. And of course, we go here, there, and everywhere. And I really appreciate the fact that Brendan is able to go with me, you know, to my island of speculation. He likes to geek out. We talk about the aliens. And just before the break, I was asking him about any kind of interesting stories. And before we were rudely interrupted by the break, you mentioned the pulsar and the detection of a pulsar. Brendan, tell us more about this, man. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so first, everyone should know what a pulsar is. It's essentially a neutron star that is spinning very fast, and it emits radio waves like a lighthouse, right? So every time it spins, it beams off some radio waves, and it beams off some more, and very regular frequency, like an incredibly regular frequency. It's insane how perfect these cosmic clocks are. It's just spinning at such a precise rate. Okay, and so we're looking out in the universe. Radio astronomy is becoming very popular, and you have a young woman, graduate student, a person in the position I'm in, named Jocelyn Bell, and she's analyzing data. Back in the day when you had to analyze data by hand, you had to literally, look at a strip chart recorder, and you had to, try to mark where the radio waves were and do that. And I had the opportunity, very fortunate for this opportunity. I had the opportunity to go into a really old radio telescope in Green Bank. We've talked about Green Bank on here.
Yeah.
And I had the ability to do some observations, not for any scientific reason, but just, because I was interested. And I got the ability to use one of those old strip chart recorders. And, it's like with the little pen that's drawing on the frequency of radio waves along the chart as it prints out. Very interesting. But she was looking at this and she was like, man, there's something really periodic here, like perfectly periodic. What could it be? And it turned out to be the first pulsar. Now her advisor won the Nobel Prize for that finding, and she got screwed out of it, which is a very unfortunate happening in the history of science. She ended up winning the fundamental prize in physics last year to make up for it. So it's arguably a more prestigious award than the Nobel today. It's way more money, so that helps, and it's a more well regarded in the community than the Nobel is even. So she got made up for that, but they had this data, and for the longest time they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what a pulsar was. They had no idea, and so they had it sitting in a box, this data in a box on a shelf, and the label that they put on the box was LGM1. and it stood for Little Green Men 1, because the only explanation that they could feasibly come up with was, and it was a little bit of a joke, but it was also a little bit serious, was aliens. Nothing could produce such a periodic signal in nature. It had to be aliens. And then we got better at detecting these things, and we said, oh, wait a minute, this is a neutron star and it's spinning. But it's an interesting story in the history of science where we found something, we couldn't explain it, and aliens seem to be, we're talking about Occam's razor earlier. When you don't understand something, sometimes aliens are the most logical conclusion you can come to.
Absolutely. And, scientists, they're just human. They're just like everyone else out there. They know about the little green men thing. They know that's like in the kind of common language type thing. And I imagine tongue in cheek and probably quite, almost not worried, but very open minded at the time as to whether it could be little green men that this was coming.
Yeah, there was serious consideration. Like, could this be the detection? In fact, I think the movie Contact and the main character in Contact was loosely based on the experience of Jocelyn Bell back in 1967. So, if you haven't seen that movie, by the way.
Oh, brilliant movie. Yeah, that truly is a brilliant movie. Now, that's quite interesting. Now, before the show, we were having an interesting discussion about, I think you done a show just recently where you were talking about life expectancy, the age that we can really hope to live to. And I was saying to you that with the advancements, again in AI, there I go with the AI, but just with technology, our knowledge of and understanding of biology as well, new medicines, things like that, I fully expect us to be living, maybe not dramatically longer, but over the next 50 years or so, I think our kind of age, our life expectancy will go up. Now, what do you say to that? Because we were talking about this before the show, right?
Yeah, I'll say one thing and then I'll start presenting some data. The one thing I'll say is that I have heard people say, sort of tongue in cheek, but also, being a little bit serious, that the first person to live to the age of 200 is alive today.
I've heard that. Yeah,
I've heard that said.
Yep.
And so it's coming down the pipe. But we were talking about this, and we were talking. It seems to us, logical people, that modern medicine is getting ever better. It's specifically in America, some of the best medical care in the world, if not the best, depending on where you're at. If you're in a impoverished region, then obviously you're not going to get great medical care. But if you're in, a good region of America, then you're going to get some of the best that exists. And we were talking about this, and we were talking about, man, we should expect the life expectancy in America to go up and up and up, and it has been going up and up and up and up and up for decades. It's been going higher and higher and higher, and we were essentially top 30 in the world. We had the top 30 life expectancies in the world, and in recent years it's been going down, and that is shocking. For the past 2 years, it has gone down. And then I don't think the 2018 data is analyzed and released yet, but I suspect that it will go down again. And it's even projected that we will go from, right now we're sitting at number 36. So on a list of life expectancies, with number 1 being the highest life expectancy, which is Japan. I don't know what the hell the Japanese do, but they live forever.
Yeah.
If you look at a list of like the oldest living people, like a large chunk of the oldest people to ever live are Japanese women. I don't understand why. I don't understand what it is about their diet or their culture, but something keeps them alive for a hell of a long time.
I think it's got to be a mix of what you said there, their diet, culture, and their genetics. There just must be something in their genetics, dude,
Yeah, I suppose. I'd be interesting to see, you have Japan, which is such a seafaring culture in terms of their cuisine, right? They eat tons of seafood. That is a large staple of their diet, is seafood. And I'm curious to see how polluting the oceans in the long term affects the life expectancy of people living in those regions that eat mostly fish. But that's besides the point. The main point is that America's life expectancy has been going down. And we're projected that by 2040, we go from number 36 to in the 60s or even in the 70s. And the reason for that, Kev, is solely due to what I would consider, I'll use a blanket term, mental health problems. In other words, drug overdoses due to the opioid epidemic and suicides. And why in America you have 40,000 people killing themselves every year. I don't understand.
No, I
I
was
don't
saying to you
understand that.
as well, it's a problem that we've got in the UK as well. Developed countries on the whole, I think, and I'm the same as you. I can't put my finger on why exactly. And I don't think there's any one direct cause leading to all of these suicides and all of people's problems. I think it's a culmination of things. But you see so many youngsters nowadays either self-harming, going down that suicide road that you spoke about there. And so many people have problems, Brendan. And yet at a time when we're so connected around the globe to everyone, it's almost as if people have nobody to talk to. That they can't share their problems to the point where it gets to that horrendous stage, you know?
Yeah, one of the things that I see in America, I can't speak for the world, but I can speak for America, is I see a real identity problem. And what I mean by that is that people have a real problem like finding something they're passionate about, identifying what that thing is, and then pursuing it as a career. We are at a point, I tell people this all the time, we are at a point where you can literally make anything profitable on the internet. It doesn't matter what you love. If you could like basket weaving, you could like playing the keyboard, you could like building homemade lamps. I don't care what it is. You can make a profit on the internet by doing it, and you can reach an audience that has never before been achievable. And yet people aren't pursuing the thing that they want to do, and I don't understand it. I don't.
No, I don't understand it either. It's almost like a paradox. I don't get it. And then just yesterday, myself and Joe were making fun of this, but it's not a laughing matter because there's the World Health Organization. They're talking about something called gaming disorder. And I do think the technology is having an effect on people. And I imagine the younger that people start using technology, i.e. the consoles and stuff like that, Brendan. I mean, I'm no expert. I can't say it has a direct effect. But, but having a child's face, right up into an iPad or some smart device from the age of goodness knows what, 2, 3 years old, that it's a no-brainer for me that can't actually be good for the child, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I should preface everything I say by saying I'm not an expert any
Yeah,
more than you're an expert.
that's the way that's why I say it, because we just don't know, right?
Yes, but here's the thing that strikes me that I see the most, that I really think has an effect is you mention a lack of connectivity. I think that there is a fallacy in a lot of the research being done that looks at little kids using things like iPads and, consoles and TV or whatever, that they attribute the video games or the TV or the iPad as being the problem. But I don't think that actually using the device is the issue. I think that the reason they're using the device is an issue. And the reason they're using the device is so that their parents can distract them. And it is in that distraction that the real problems come. Because it is in that distraction where now you have a population of people who aren't experiencing real human connectivity anymore. That's in my mind, the problem. The problem is not the video games. The problem is the fact that the video games are being used by a lot of parents, and many parents listening to this are probably guilty, because of course you are. Because why wouldn't you be? It's not like I'm vilifying you for it. I'm not saying you're a bad parent for doing it, but you undoubtedly utilize these sorts of technologies to distract your children so that you could, get your precious time. And in doing so, you're shoving them away and putting them into a little bubble. And it just so happens that bubble can be a bad place sometimes. Video game chat rooms are some of the most vile places in the world. And so there's just a real lack of human connectivity, because we are more connected than ever, but there's less human connectivity than ever, like actual physical. On one hand, Kev, you and I have the opportunity to talk across different countries, different time zones in real time, something that has never before been achievable. And we have the ability to do it even face to face. You can see me. I could see you. Well, I could sort of see you, but you get the point. And for some reason, we feel so disconnected. And the disconnection comes from the fact that now we rely on this so much that we've sort of neglected the need for actual human connectivity, actual like face-to-face
And even,
conversation.
yeah, even when you go out into public, it's like a different world now. You've got your digital world and you've got your real world. But I
Yep,
was
everyone
like,
has headphones in and
yeah,
they're listening to
you go
podcast and
for
they're
a cup of
listening to.
coffee and there's four people sat at a table. And that's good, right? No, because they've all got their heads stuck in their mobile devices. And
Yes.
the first time they look up to speak to each other is obviously the end of their lunch break or when one of them has to go. And even when we do that physical kind of meeting, old school, even then we're still, it's almost like automatic now that people are just looking at their devices. And, people, especially in my circles, we talk about, Mark of the Beast and, taking the microchip and being part of the AI hive mind. We've already got an external device that's connecting us to that hive mind, and it's the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, let me ask you a question, Kev. If you could fast forward, and you were given the option when you were about to die, someone came, you're 100 years old, your physical body is deteriorating, and you're given the option to have your consciousness put on a chip, and then you could live forever. Would you do it? Or would you die?
People are gonna hate this, but yeah, I would do it.
Would you?
Yeah, yeah. If they can get that technology sussed, I think I would do it. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. The thought of living forever terrifies me. However, at that stage, we're moving into a very human 2.0 world. Call it a sci-fi kind of reality. And yeah, I think it probably, if they can master that uploading, the digitization of consciousness, and I say that loosely because what is consciousness? You'll know yourself. That's one of the hottest questions in science. But if we can do that, I think it'll become quite commonplace. Probably be expensive to start with, but then over time, I do think it'll become common.
Oh, it will definitely become common.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would love to hear an argument from someone who says it wouldn't. Of course, no one wants to die, right? Of course you don't. I don't want to die, but at the same time, man, this is a question that keeps me up at night. Not literally, but it's
No,
it's a
I know what
tough
you
one.
mean. Yeah, that is.
It's like what because that might be something that's feasible in my lifetime.
Well, you
Like,
hear
all right,
people like
Brendan, you're gonna die.
yeah,
Do you want uploaded to a chip?
yeah, you've got
What's
Ray
up?
Kurzweil. You've got the futurist societies. I mean, this is something they're looking at. I've been looking at something called 2045, the global initiative. I'm not even sure if it's still running or not, but it's got all of your leading kind of people from the world of futurism, the chips, and it's got your Craig Venters, it's got your Stuart Hameroffs, it's got George Church, the crazy biologist, as I call him. But this is the way science is going. Now, we see them mapping the brain in more and more detail all of the time. And I ask you, in your opinion, because again, it's not really your expertise field of study here, but do you think it is possible to take somebody's brain, take the kind of everything that makes them what they are, and then transfer that to some silicon device? Do you think they can do that?
I think there are two ways to look at this. I think taking like man, that is a tough. See, I feel like I want to say no. I want to say no, but I feel like I'm just being ignorant because I think a neuroscientist who works in the field would be like, wait a minute, we're really close. We're close to doing it. You just don't know. So it's one of the most interesting things to me is like, can you create consciousness? You mentioned the fact that we don't know what consciousness is, but one of the things that seems evident about consciousness is that it seems to be emergent, right? And what I mean by that is that whatever factors have caused our consciousness to be here, they've caused it to be an emergent phenomenon, meaning if you put the puzzle together in just the right place, then consciousness just pops on, just like that. It just appears. It's not a fundamental feature of nature, but it just seems to be emergent. It seems to exist for no other reason than the right molecules came together at the right time, and it just happened. It turned on. And if it is emergent, then it would be almost impossible to recreate a scenario that would make it emerge. It would be really hard. It's really hard to, unless you understand these theories of everything and you have some equation that can govern the entire history of the universe, which no one is ever going to create in my mind, in my humble opinion, then you can't just make it emerge. So it's a fascinating thing. And honestly, I wish I knew more about it. I wish I knew more about neuroscience. I wish I was deeper in that realm, because I've had a lot of conversations with people about this, sort of idea of consciousness, with philosophers, with physicists, with people in biology.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you have to even ask: is consciousness something that emerges internally? As a result of the way we're put together, or could it be something external that we're able to receive via our brain, and of course
yes,
our heart as well? It's got the
that is a
same kind of cells, so it makes you wonder if there's almost a conscious field, and if there is that, then Brendan, again, we're speculating, but if it comes outside in, then theoretically, if you could build another receiver, it might be exactly like our brain. It might be entirely different, but if it could receive consciousness and then add it to the subtotal of all of our memories, all of the way that our neurons used to fire, maybe then, right?
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. You do. You bring up an excellent point. Is this thing internal or is it external? You know, um, it's a fantastic point, and I can't think of a way to verify either one of those.
No,
Like, how
exactly.
how do you come up with the verification? How do you test it? Um, and that's where we need the neuroscientists or the psychologists to come up with a way for us to better understand it, because
Absolutely.
it seems so far away to me, but to some people it might seem like it's around the corner. And I would love to sit down and talk to the people who think that, if they are out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely seems like something they're striving to do. And whether they can or not, I was speaking to Geordie Rose, as I was saying to you. He's got the company Sanctuary AI.
Hmm.
He deals with the, building machines that can think. And he's got the synths, as they call them. And he said basically on a scale of 1 to 10 when it comes to, or 1 to 100, when it comes to these things being conscious, being sentient, you're looking at maybe 5 to 10. They're nowhere near, because A, they don't
Right.
understand consciousness in the first place, and whether they can even achieve it or not, that's another thing altogether. And it was really interesting asking somebody about this that's working in that field, because this consciousness, something that we're all reliant on, something we operate with all the time, every minute of our lives, whether we're aware of it or not, and yet we still can't put our finger on what it is, how it works, and yet here we are talking about colonizing space, and we don't even know what our own operating system's like.
Yes, we understand very little about the the brain, but in particular, like this idea of consciousness. It is just as much a black box as is something like the beginning of the universe.
Yeah.
Whatever the process was that literally set the universe off from a quantum bubble to the where it is today. And I don't mean inflation. I don't mean the inflationary epoch. I don't mean the so-called Big Bang. I mean literally, like, why did the universe, from just like n- nothing, if you will,
Yeah, because there was
if
no
you want to
time
say
before
that.
that, right? Because nothing was in motion, so no time existed. So there was nothing.
Right. So then people come up with these multiverse ideas and they're like, but wait, there's a field out there, and the field has little quantum bubbles in it, and those quantum bubbles expand, and then you have a universe. Okay, where's that field at? Where's that multiverse field? What is beyond that? Where does it end? What's the inception of everything? And it's very much the same question in consciousness. It's interesting that, you have to ask the same questions when you look out as when you look in. You look into consciousness and you have to come to the same questions and start with the same premises as you do when you look as far out as possible to the beginning of everything. Man,
I,
it will boggle you.
as above, so below. And then you look out at, like, we spoke about this before, how you can look at the orbits of planets and things, and roughly it looks like, the kind of atom when you've got the nucleus and the electrons, things like that. It's a really mysterious and wonderful universe that we live in.
It I should say, in the so-called Bohr model of the atom, um, that is true. But when you get into the quantum model of the atom, all of a sudden they look very different,
Yeah.
very different. The quantum model of what's going on in the atom has almost nothing to do with orbits at all, and it complicates everything. But what's interesting is that the Bohr model of the atom, approximating electrons as being in orbit around protons and neutrons works so well that when you first learn it in physics, that's what you learn. You learn the Bohr model because it's easy to visualize, it's easy to do calculations with, and it's, for the most part, correct. Now, when you start doing quantum physics, it becomes very incorrect. And so then you have to start, looking deeper and deeper and deeper. And the question is, when can you stop looking deeper? Do you ever come to an answer? Do you ever come to a conclusion?
I think that's the one thing that I've probably learned over the years is that there is no answer. There is no conclusion. The questions, they just keep going on. Once we solve one thing, Brendan, it just opens up a whole new can of worms,
Yes, and good.
Yeah.
Good. Because if that didn't happen, we would live in a really boring place. I am glad that science doesn't have all the answers. I remember when I was a 16-year-old kid and I wanted to be a scientist, I was fearful. I was like, what if we figure everything out and then I don't have a job? Now I am convinced that will never happen. We will never get all of the answers. And so thankfully, I should always have gainful employment.
And thankfully, we will always have plenty to talk about. Brendan, it's been absolutely brilliant again. Who have you got coming on in your show in the next couple of weeks? If you can tell us, because I know you've got such big guests that sometimes you have to kind of leave it till the last minute.
Yes, I have a few things lined up. I'll advertise next week's guest. Next week's guest is Dr. David Fisher. He has written books about the Apollo programs and about the history of spaceflight, U.S. spaceflight, and he is literally, I don't know how his brain works, but he's a physicist by trade, but his real love is this, is spaceflight history. And you could say to him, Dave, in the, what mission was launched on June 17th, 1970, and he would be able to rattle off not only the mission that was launched, but he would be able to tell you who was on the mission, who was in the control room. I don't understand his brain. I just don't.
You got to love people like that. And I've seen another guest that you had on your show just recently, and it's somebody I'm going to be reaching out to, Dr. David Warmflash. Great name. And he talks about the moon, right?
Yes, literally the greatest name.
It's the best name in the world, Dr. David Warmflash. Love it.
Yes, it's a fantastic name, and we had a great conversation about the moon and about his new book. And we talked about the formation of the moon. We talked about how the Greeks used the moon. We talked about the future of the moon, some of the same things that we talked about here today. And that was a fantastic discussion. But I have, huge guests lined up. I don't know why. I like the element of surprise with my guests. I like to release the episode without anyone knowing it's coming. Maybe that's not a good marketing tactic, but for some reason I love that.
No, I like that as well. Keep people waiting, anticipation. And we'll be anticipating Brendan coming back next month. Remember to check out the State of the Universe podcast. And that's www.thestateoftheuniverse.com. I'll be joining Joe Joseph after the break. Until next time, good night and God bless.